I think the interesting thing about being in the Senate, and we all acknowledge it's a long shot at this point, but I wouldn't do this if I didn't think it really was a possibility, is that if I were in the Senate, one senator could have great influence in holding things up. I use the example of, I think the most important vote any U.S. congressman or U.S. senator will ever make is on war. There is nothing more important than a vote on sending young people to war. And that, I mean, is more important than any economic issue. And if I were a U.S. senator, I would have stood up and made them vote for a declaration of war. Now with Afghanistan, I would have voted for a declaration of war. And with Afghanistan, I probably also would have agreed that the president could have done something immediately and sent special forces in to round up the people who attacked us. But it took us a month to go into Afghanistan. In World War II, we were attacked, and within 24 hours, Congress voted for a declaration of war. But it still should be a grand debate, and you vote that way. With Iraq, I had misgivings from the beginning, and I think a lot of the public was misled to think they attacked us, and they didn't. And there have been some problems, and I would have voted against declaration of war with Iraq. But I would have tried to make them vote for a declaration up or down. My dad brought it up in the International Affairs Committee in the House, and you know what they said? This is what you're getting from your leadership, sometimes of both parties. I think at this time it was a Republican leader, and he said, Ron, that part of the Constitution's an anachronism. We don't pay any attention to that anymore. They don't pay attention to any of the Constitution, but they don't pay attention to the Declaration of War provision. The leading Democrat on there said, Ron, you're just trying to make this into a frivolous debate. My dad says there's two things in Congress they'll never listen to. You'll be laughed out of the place if you bring a moral argument or a constitutional argument. They do not want to hear it. It's all about power politics. It's about who can get the money and who we can get the money to. It just switches. When the Republicans in charge, their friends get it. When the Democrats in charge, their friends get it. Now, that's not true of all Republicans, but it has been true, unfortunately, of a lot of the people that have been in charge. We need new people. We just need new people, and I think it's worth the effort for us to get out and try to change things.
With economics as they are, you know, right now with gutting this economy through the Treasury and the Federal Reserve and all that stuff, another thing that concerns me heavily is Obama has been a long-term supporter of this Law of the Sea Treaty and carbon taxes and all that, and I see that as a additional whammy against our economy if we submit ourselves to that global UN type of thing.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think the Law of the Sea Treaty is a bad deal, and not enough people know about it. More people need to know about that, and that's something I would vote against.
What would distinguish you from the other potential Republican candidates?
Well, the main candidate, well, see, it's still kind of unknown. I'm not going to run against Bunning because I don't think anybody can beat Bunning. But everybody I meet says he's not running, and some predict Saturday he's going to say he's not running. I don't know what's going to happen. If he runs, I'll end up dropping back out, but I'm trying to organize. The other main opponent is Trey Grayson. We differ in the sense that he was recently a Democrat. He was a Clinton delegate in the 1990s. And I think if you're a Clinton delegate and you're a grown individual, that says something about you. He lives in northern Kentucky, so he became a Republican because the Republicans are in the majority up there. I think Trey is a nice guy. I think he's a smart guy. But I don't think he really, intellectually, is a limited government person, nowhere near to the degree I believe in. The other thing is I think his career is in politics and will be. My career is in medicine, and I'm doing this because I fear what's happening to our country, and I will vote the way I think is right, which is against most of the federal spending. When the Republicans come up, instead of having a debate between a $1.75 trillion deficit on Obama's side and $500 billion on the Republicans, I say, Republicans, we stand up, let's make an alternative, a balanced budget. We've always said we believed in it, but we were in charge for 8 years, we never introduced anything remotely close to a balanced budget. I would say we introduced a balanced budget first year. Make it an alternative. Would it take cuts? Yes. Can you cut just welfare? You know, some say, I would cut the welfare queen and now we have a balanced budget. It's not enough money. And it also looks like you vilify one segment of society. You have to cut across the board everywhere. In some ways, you might simplify it by saying that that's what you believe in. And across the board, cut it 1 or 2%. You might be able to, and another way to get acceptance for this is, you might say, I will reintroduce the budget that we had in 2005. So it doesn't look like, oh, that idiot's going to get rid of all government. That's impossible. People would say, could we live with the budget of 2005? Because revenues continue to rise, you might be able to have 2005's budget and have a balanced budget, you know, without any changes. But I would be a deficit hog, and I think you have to be a deficit hog. I don't think any of the other candidates believe to the extent I believe in what you have to do or how serious things are in our country right now.
I was wondering what your views were regarding the federal income tax, whether you'd be for its replacement of a national sales tax like a fair tax,
Right.
or maybe replacing it with nothing at all.
Yeah. I think you have to look at the deficits the first thing for me. And I do want to reduce the income tax and if possible eliminate the income tax. I would rather have a sales tax. But I don't think a sales tax trade for the income tax is ever going to happen. Plus I don't believe in really saying, well, let's have the same taxes, but I don't like you as much as I like you. You're a rich guy and you pay a lot of income tax. Let's stick it on the guy who doesn't make as much. Sales tax will be regressive. Poor and working class will pay more. Would I prefer to pay a sales tax over an income tax? Yes. And I probably would at almost every level. If I were even at the lower end of the economic spectrum, I would, because I want to be able to have the ability to get ahead in life, and I would get ahead without an income tax. Yes, ultimately, and I probably would support any legislation immediately get rid of it. It won't happen. But I would try to introduce things. I think the first thing is you balance the budget, and then you try to reduce the size of government. Because even a balanced budget, people say, well, the budget right now is $3.75 trillion. Well, if we balance it, it's still a huge government. Is that a good thing? What if we make it $5 trillion and it's balanced? So balanced isn't always the answer. Smaller is the answer. So you have to get smaller. But what we've never had is anybody with reduced spending. Ron Lewis was a friend of mine. I would introduce him at Lions Club when he'd come to town, and I would say I'm impressed with his integrity. He's a good Christian man, and I give him an A+ for cutting my taxes, but a C- for cutting any spending. He never voted against an appropriation bill, and then when he left, he voted for the bank bailout. And so you've been luckier here, Ed. Whitfield voted against the bank bailout, so you've been a little bit luckier here. But that's what you need. You need to hold their feet to the fire. Anybody else?
You mentioned Patriot Act. You've seen under the guise of the Patriot Act, all sorts of crimes have been punished ad hoc. Do you think that if although we're not a border state, will you support legislation to secure the borders? Because there's an interesting irony of the fear of terrorism, and yet we have wide open borders.
Yeah, I heard a lot of my dad's stump speeches, so you have to excuse me if I repeat some of this, but one of his statements used to be, you know, we chastise Iraq and Syria for not guarding their border, and we do not a damn thing for our border. We've got troops on all these borders around the world. We have troops in 130 countries, and we do nothing about our border. I don't believe you absolutely close it, but I do believe you have rules and regulations about immigration. We've always had those rules, but we don't enforce them anymore, and we have people coming in by the millions. I don't think that's good. One, from a national security point of view, there could be terrorists coming across the border. Where I disagree maybe with some people on the immigration issue, I don't like the symbolism of a 15-foot fence going the whole border. Extraordinarily expensive, but it reminds me of the Berlin Wall, which was built to keep, people in from fleeing to the west. I think you could actually put an electronic fence under the whole border for probably $10 or $15 million, which sounds like a lot to us, but that's peanuts. And you could probably have helicopter stations in maybe 5 different locations. And I think you could have any breach of the border could be stopped at any point, and we send them back. The other thing we could do is trade treaties with Mexico should not be approved if they're not going to take care of their border. They're just going to keep sending people across the border illegally. We don't approve any kind of trade favorability with Mexico. We make that part of international negotiations. You won't find that from other candidates, I think, that. But we have to do something. But am I absolutely opposed to immigration? No, there's probably a certain amount of immigrants that can come in and do work in our country. Some might come and go, and some might just come. I mean, my great-grandparents came in the 1880s from Germany, so I mean, we all came from somewhere, so we shouldn't be absolutely opposed to it. And also you have to go to, we don't have a large Hispanic voting bloc, but Republicans have gotten in a problem by vilifying the Hispanic vote, and they're getting almost zero of it now. So we have to find a way to believe in the rule of law, believe in border control, but at the same time